money anymore, and they didn't have to worry about marketing their product anymore, where everything just kind of felt sustainable. And the revelation that they made is that is like, life is the ups and downs, right? Like, so think about like what is it, EKG, whatever the thing that, measures your pulse, I guess. Life is that modulation of highs and lows and highs and lows and highs and lows, and that struggle to kind of like move forward, move the needle a little bit and to like stay alive. And stasis, that flatlining, is death, right? And like, no one who is a person who identifies as a creative or is in a field that where they are creating actually wants that. And I think that, it's funny because we chase this feeling of having everything under our control, but really, like, we don't actually want everything under our control, because the challenge is what helps us learn new things and develop and learn new things about ourselves. And I think that when we can think about things a little bit more kind of like abstractly, we have a lot of fear about the unknown, but the unknown is like where we've made like really like significant advancements. And if we can kind of personally embrace that, it's great. But I think without assumption, right? Like, so like TypeScript, awesome, right? There's so many cool things that are like coming out of that. But at the same time, I don't see a lot of people, like, you have people who are like zealots about TypeScript, and then people who are kind of extremely defensive about JavaScript, and like, I don't want any TypeScript in my JavaScript. And at the end of the day, there's probably an inevitable future where we consider these things in balance and are totally okay with the fact that we have some JavaScript for the things that need to be like strongly dynamic, and some TypeScript for the things that we do want some of those developer experience improvements around, the like type safety and all that kind of stuff. As humans, what we want is the availability to kind of like come and go in between those things to solve the problems that we are tasked with solving. But like, nobody wants to get into the like, this is good for this and this is good for this and we should use both at the beginning. It's all just kind of like fights, and like, we do everything better.
Well, and see, that's where I think you mentioned fear, and that's where I think a lot of this comes from. I think people especially in today's world, and I think this is why Twitter came to my mind so quick.
Mhm.
Twitter, and what's the new one? Metaverse, is that what Facebook is called?
Yeah.
But I do think it's gotten worse over the years, where people don't have that like sense of belonging at home,
Mm,
like maybe we want, and I think that we need. And I think especially with things like COVID and, social distancing, and even with social media, where we don't have to go out like we used to. We don't have
yeah.
connections with people like we used to. And so when it comes to, well, I'm a Angular developer, I'm a React developer, I use TypeScript, I use Java, like, I'm C#, like, whatever it is that you are using, I think that's why we kind of cling to it a little bit, because we have this real longing to belong, right?
Mm,
We want to be in a group, in a community where we are all the same, where we're accepted, where our ideas, we can bounce ideas off each other. It's collaborative. It's a lot of imagination. You have that acceptance from other people, and nobody's questioning you because we're all React, we're all Angular. But so, like, we've kind of touched on it, but I want to just peel this back. Like, what are some ways we have seen this breaking down right across the community? Michael, you kind of said at the top of the episode, this was a topic that you've mentioned a teeny bit in your own podcast. It's something that you've had more private conversations about, and I agree. Like, Eric and I have had more private conversations about this, and other people, we've had private conversations. But why is it not out there? Why are we afraid to just kind of talk about it and work through it? But I think I really want to start with, like, where have we seen this breaking down? Where have we seen this become a problem within the programming community at large?
yeah. At first, I just want to say, like, I love that statement you made, the like longing to belong. I just like that, and I think that you're so right. We have, over the last couple years, especially, we have lost our places of physical community. Meetups, working, and we've kind of been thrust headlong into these social, like just broadly social places like Twitter. And Twitter, or even like one of my favorite platforms where I spend a lot of time, is YouTube, right? And these platforms are designed to be divisive, right? Engagement is all about divisiveness, which sucks, but like that's just like the way it is. Like, and it for whatever reason, it does kind of like trigger our sense of belonging when someone says, React is dead. It's like, oh crap, like, so am I like on the outs now? And it doesn't matter. Like, we're so bad at evaluating like the source of these things, and like actually taking the time to look at the numbers, because like, you look at the numbers and like none of these are dead. Like, we all have a strong future in whichever framework we want to spend our time on. But there is that, like, when we spend time on these engagement platforms, we think that things look different than they are. And even having had the privilege of being able to talk with the React core team about some of their decision making, and some of the new features, like in React 18, and helping with that release, there is always this point in the conversation where someone on the core team says, "Now we need to remember, like, Twitter and the conversations happening there are a bad index of how people actually use this and the features that are actually being used by real teams building real software, that aren't yelling about it on Twitter." And I think that's such an important context to hold in your mind, right? Like that social media, YouTube, Twitter, like, these are engagement platforms. The strong, like the most engagement baity ideas are going to be the ones that rise to the top. And they're going to be raised by people who know how to do that, and aren't necessarily people who are actually living day to day in the code and building software. So I really think that kind of the antidote to that is getting small again, is kind of thinking about your small community, your like the people in your specific technology niche that you align with, the people at your company, right? Like, because you're building software, and your alignments don't have to be the alignments of Airbnb or some other Microsoft or GitHub. You can have different ideas. They don't have to align, while still recognizing that other people have solutions that match their organizations and the sizes in the communities that they have. I think that is one of the things that we do. It's so funny because, like, as developers, we really kind of prize ourselves as being like critical thinkers, but like when you really break it down, like we are not very good critical thinkers a lot of the times when it comes to things that we feel kind of like will disrupt the way that we work. And there's definitely something that like goes off, and we're like, oh no, like, we can't ever let that happen. Like, everything needs to be 2 spaces tabs for the rest of all time. And it's like, maybe not.
Maybe we're just like so traumatized with how like much we had to learn to be successful in this career. Maybe if it was simpler, we wouldn't be this like defensive of the things that we think we know.
Yeah, that seems very fair, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But who knows? I'm just spitballing here. What do you think we'd have? What do you think we could have just right now if we would just break down these barriers between the different communities and just start sharing the best ideas? Am I just talking about a pipe dream here? Is this something that could actually have real benefits and maybe could really happen?
I think that these things do happen in the abstract, right? But they're usually done by people who are putting in a lot of hard work, and not the people who are yelling on social media. And so there's a lot of people behind the scenes doing incredible work, like 2 people that just like did like a Herculean feat in my mind is, you look at Jen Simmons and Rachel Andrews, who really just pushed grid into the web platform. And that is something that is so important, changes the way that we make websites. It unlocks like full new capabilities. And so much of the work was just hard work, right? Like it wasn't the stuff that we see online all the time. And like that does have a like just transformative power to the way we work. And so I think that knowing where to look is important, because I think that the platform is improving, and finding people who are putting in the hard work and filling your like timeline and mental space with those people is like really important in my mind, because these things take like, especially platform work is measured in like years and sometimes decades. It's just not as exciting when you're like looking for stuff to, retweet on Twitter.
You've kind of talked about like, there are positive sides to this. And I love that you brought that up, because I do believe that. I do believe that having a framework, having a language that you use and you really identify with, like, we need that, because like you pointed out, we need to be pushing React forward so that it can do more. It can be more for us. Same with Angular, same with Vue. But there is that fine line of like, how can we encourage this kind of, like pride in what we're doing, what we're using, the tools we're using, without also encouraging like this negativity and being so much of a zealot about it. Like there's that fine balance. So do you have a recommendation of how we can find that balance?
Yeah, it's really tough. But I think that, I don't know, for me at least, I feel like a lot of it is personal. Like the idea of starting with you. And I think that everyone at every stage in their career kind of has to decide like what type of person they're going to be. Are they going to be the person who has an immutable perspective on tabs and is going to like to the death defend a single framework? Or are they going to be a person who wants to think about the web like progressively and like hopes that what they're doing will eventually impact the framework? And like it's really tough, right? Like this stuff is really hard, because movement requires a community to like rally around a thing, and community requires engagement, and engagement requires absurdity. And so like there's this really kind of challenging thing that happens. And so you kind of end up in some ways having to be like, become the villain that you don't want to be in order to see the change that you want to see. But I don't know. I think that that's a worthwhile challenge of like continuing to remind yourself like what we do this for. I think it's really interesting, because even React, right, was a correction from where we were headed in the platform with object.observe. Right. It was kind of, there was this standard proposal that was gaining a lot of traction, where you could observe changes in an object and then react to them with the event listener. And React kind of stood in total opposition to that mindset. And there was a lot of, advocacy, marketing behind that to say like, hey, we don't see a future in this standards proposal. We see it as this way. And the market kind of agreed, I up to this point, at least, that was like the best way forward. And so there is this kind of like push and pull, and so like we're seeing that with a bunch of libraries saying like, well, we actually don't like the way that React has to own the entire platform in order to like do stuff, right? Like, and is there a path for the React component to actually make its way into the platform? And we've seen some work around that, with that collaboration between Next.js and Google and Facebook to extract concepts like Scheduler, I guess, is the library for that, for, cooperative concurrency and scheduling different events based on priority, if they're a user event or a network event and all that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of work coming out of that, but it isn't like React going into the browser, right? It's like there's this side effect of this opinion that's held in React that then that small piece of it, just the schedule piece of it, kind of actually ends up making its way into the platform. And then from there, then maybe we can build some other things on top of it at like a higher level of abstraction that benefit all frameworks. you know, you have to have these polarizing ideas to eventually like figure out like, oh, we thought everything needed to be this